talking about now with the
right, exactly. Yeah, you got it.
I have to just say up front that I could not hear any of the previous discussion on this. The last meeting, the month or so, the audio was so scary, especially that last portion.
That was intentional. But Larry said he did think he solved the problem.
Yeah,
we were talking back and forth.
Yeah, we did some experimenting, so it seems better, but we'll find out after tonight. So,
is there anybody listening that could tell?
Yeah, I heard that same for the housing meeting.
yeah, the planning board meeting was about,
The planning board meeting was really, everyone was trying to make, like Marianne repeat herself continually, because you were just breaking up.
No,
I know, and I was speaking clearly, it was just,
It wasn't,
I think I found the cause of it, so we'll see how it works. Okay, so as far as the committee, you spoke about that at the last meeting. In front of you is a draft that Arlene we put together to try to capture, what the potential would be for formation of the committee. So if you want to take a look at that and any comments you have or questions, I don't know if you wanted to give a name for the committee too, or introduce what you have there.
Oh, sure. I mean, so you mean a name that's different from diversity, equity, inclusion?
Well, I didn't know if you wanted it to be called something different.
Oh, no.
I suggest something different.
No, I think that's fine. I think that captures it. And I think the idea within the resolution is really sort of what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean for our village? And it's not just for the people who live here, right, but the people who visit our village, the people who work in our village. And so we tried to put together a resolution that encompasses those things, and really, so it's sort of it's a broad mission, but the idea is, with this resolution is just, the topics that we had sort of discussed in our last meeting, which were hiring practices, employee and volunteer training, and special events and community celebration. So I think that's sort of a starting point, but the idea, of course, would be kind of that broader mission, which is, we want to continue to have Irvington, be a community that's welcoming and inclusive, and for everyone, again, just not the people who live here. So that was the idea behind the resolution, the way that it's written, but no pride of authorship. So if people have improvements, we're totally open, obviously open to that.
What I like is that there's a mission, it's a simple statement as to what it is, and I think that's it's in the priorities, it's something we can all get behind. And then when you said make recommendations, that you say may include such topics as, it means that these are things that are important to the board, but may and such as mean that we were open to whatever else people would say. It's not saying you will do this, or because I expressed last meeting how I thought the board should have some direction, but we should be open. This, I think, captures that, because we're saying, here are things that are important to us, but it's may, and such as, tell us what you also think.
Yeah, and I think that the committee it changes, right, from time to time, maybe what things they might focus on. So I think that is to build some flexibility in there, to allow the committee to also let us know, right, the things that we might be missing.
And I think it does play off of the original welcoming statement, having, welcoming kind of being the first thing that it says, which is, I think it kind of expands on that original theme as well. And,
And that theme did include people who live, work, and visit.
Yeah.
I have no problem with this. I'm just curious if you have given any further thought, one, as to how large the committee would be, and two, how we would, I'm assuming Brian appoints the committee members, correct?
Says the board.
But no, actually, Brian.
Well, yeah, technically,
No, I'm saying this says the board. That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Well, the board, appointed by the Board of Trustees, right?
However you decide.
We want to try to aim for some stated variety of people to try to include people who work in the village, people who are employed by the village, as well as residents who live in the village.
How do do we do that? I mean, I think, so I spoke, it's good that you bring that up, because I spoke to Joe Archino, and I know that he wants to be a part of the committee, and I think that makes perfect sense, you know?
Well, he's involved in most of the celebrations. and-
Exactly. And just also broaden, you know what I mean? I think Parks and Recs is something that people, is a touch point for a lot of people in the village, so I think
It's
that's.
like, to me, the biggest inroads we have with seniors as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And youth,
And children,
it's like literally
like
from
the
cradle to
rec
grave,
center.
right? Like,
Yeah,
it's-
that's
all
where
the
my kids,
activities.
yeah, that's where my kids had a lot of,
I can with the camp there every summer,
Yeah.
the first summer.
Well, I think Joe's gonna need to write an essay, we're gonna need to.
exactly. But I do think, you know, my preference, and this is probably the part of being inclusive, is to allow, like, you know, I don't have a number in mind, but I think it would be good to allow people to express an interest, in it. You know, you want people who are interested in this topic and area and the mission. So, I don't have a strong preference. I sort of would like to know who's interested in working on it, and I would, again, like to be as inclusive, right, in line with what we're doing. So yeah, I haven't given the number too much thought.
I almost think we can, I mean, if we suddenly had 50 people apply, we could figure out a way to limit it.
Manageable number.
My guess is we get 4 or 5 that maybe raise their hand. 2 of those end up not being that active anyway. So,
Right.
you know, to me, I don't think we have to worry too much about limiting it in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree.
But we can always add okay, this has been unbelievable. We had 39 people. We think it should be about 15.
Right.
So we don't want to say no to them, but, you know, we're going to say, hey, we're going to appoint these people, you know, this group, first group, and then we'll maybe have a second group or whatever. There's also plenty to work on. So I don't think we have to worry about it, but, you know, I always do think if a group gets bigger than X, it depends on the group and the mission. And sometimes you can divide groups into smaller task force or whatever. But I don't think we have to worry yet, except if we're so overwhelmed. My guess is that we'll get a small core that raises their hand, and then we'll get another small group that we say, we really like you to join this, we think it's important. So I think between the two of them, we'll probably get to that 10 to 12 group that kind of makes it viable,
Right.
But not unwieldy.
Yeah.
You know, I could see 20 people, but I think that gets much more complicated just to even schedule meetings and things.
I think 20 people is a lot.
Yeah, I think 12 is always kind of my magic number,
Yeah.
except if you divide it into subcategories, which
Yeah.
we could. Again, if we have a giant, you know, response, then maybe we look at breaking up some of the goals into the subcategories and having like an executive board or something like that.
Or even just, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I was just gonna say that for the DEI committee, originally for the PTSA, was like 50 people that met for a year very consistently. And it did whittle down, but I also think we broke people into areas, right?
Yeah.
So I do, I like the idea of being more inclusive, right? Letting
And I
people
think
sort of
too,
like raise their hand and then see, and what you said, Brian, I agree with. If it's like 40 people, then, you know, for a committee, that doesn't work. That's not gonna be too effective.
and I think, you know, you need people, especially in the beginning, when you're getting something off the ground, to have that group of really enthusiastic people. Again, you usually lose a few, but you need that core group that kind of keeps it going. And, you know, we've seen it with our Green Policy Task Force and you know, similar in groups.
We're trying to get reboots.
Sometimes, exactly.
One thing I was thinking is that at the theater commission, we talked a lot about how not everyone has to be on the theater commission to take part in things related to the theater. So in other words, if you're interested in the short film festival, you can be on the short film festival committee without being on the commission. And then it might be something here. If we do get, obviously, it doesn't matter if we only get, you know, a few people, but if we get a lot, we say, well, you know, we're gonna have subcommittees and stuff, and you can be on one of the subcommittees.
I think that's a good idea.
So I had 2 questions that I'm thinking over. One was, we're talking about this for the village and for visitors, but how does this effectively reach out to, you know, I was thinking first, business owners, you know, or businesses themselves, because when I read here, employee and volunteer training, I was thinking it was more village focused. So, you know, in terms of setting policy, but there should be a component of it that's also about outreach into the community, I think, as part of the mission.
To the businesses or?
To the community as a whole. There's
Like to
not one
outreach to the
entity
community?
that's just sitting there, you know, decoupled from everything and, you know, providing stuff to the village board, but then, I don't know, it seems like the roots are missing to it. The roots back into the community are missing to it. So that's the first, I don't know, how do you deal with that?
I think you let the committee deal with it, frankly. I mean, in other words, we laid out in the resolution what we can control, which involves employee and volunteer training. That's what we called out. I understand the idea of, maybe the employees of the businesses in the village need to have similar training opportunities so that they are also equally welcoming. But that's not something we can control directly, but maybe.
Well, if you create a program that is actually, like,
That's right. I think that's got to come from the committee. That's my own.
That sounds right.
I thought you were saying maybe something slightly different, but I do think committees like this, like one of the things that I think they should think about is celebrations. And, Joe Archino and I had we had a few conversations about this also, which is, as a village, what celebrations, what special events do we support as from the village itself? And maybe even thinking about how those celebrations look more inclusive. Like, for example, Irvington until this point hasn't really celebrated Pride, right? So, and that's something I would like to see us do in some way, right, to recognize Pride. So.
Right, last year, Connie really led it, I helped her,
Yeah.
but there was not a village event, it was just a bunch of citizens who were.
Yeah, I mean, Juneteenth is sort of similar in that way, but, so I think those are the things that a committee like this would think about, right? Like what sort of events and honestly, like even in the events that we have, like even diversity of music, right? Like there might be, Joe and I were talking about this, like, there might be different kinds of music that people like, right? Not just rock bands, for example, right? Yeah, but, which may bring more people out, right? If you have a diverse kind of events. So I thought that's what you were talking about, Mark, but I do think that that's the kind of thing that a committee should, like a DEI committee should do, which is like, how do we make it?
That solves the issue. And right, I mean, Larry's right, we can't control the community at large, so we can only bring stuff to them as events or as, something, not just celebratory necessarily. The other thing I was thinking of, and so it's just because of the times we're in, I'm worried that this committee could become controversial, and I don't mean, it could be a target for disruption, I guess that's what I'm trying to say, where people are coming to try to make points. I don't know how it's structured, and I don't know if the meetings are generally open or if they're just closed to the committee, but I'd just be concerned about that because there are a few people that have shown their heads in this village who tend to be very reactionary.
Yeah.
But it's precisely about this kind of focus.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I've thought a lot about this because I've obviously been the target of a lot of things in this community, but I do think that we have a mission, right? We're saying we want to have a committee that is going to focus on continuing to focus on Irvington being welcoming and inclusive. And I do think that you sort of need buy-in, like, so the people who come to that committee need to believe in that mission, right? You can't have a committee, in my opinion, where people want to disrupt that. I think there's nothing different about this committee that should make it an open committee, like where the meetings have to be open. I think it should run like the other committees of the village, where people have, where the committee has meetings and they're going to they'll make recommendations, like the way that, like, Green Policy Task Force, for example, may come and say, here's our thought on the priorities, and as a board, we can say we accept that or we don't, but I don't think we should think of it as any different. I hear you because, obviously there are things where people, sometimes these issues are hot button issues for people. There's a lot of buttons, but, a lot of these things are not very controversial, right? Like hiring, and training, and these are all things that are pretty, mainstream things that, we know we have to work on, you know, I think most American, like, businesses and government, you know, offices, like, I think we're aware of what the issues are. We're aware that, like, we want to make institutions reflect what the, you know, the communities look like. I think we have this issue in the school where we have a staff that completely does, you know, that does not reflect the student body, and that has to be worked on. You know, I don't think that's, maybe some people disagree with that. It's not super controversial, you know, in most circles, but I would just say that this committee would run like the other committees in the village. I don't think it should be any different.
So what I'm hearing is that means really it's not clear we want a complete diverse membership of the committee, because I can think of several people right now who I won't name, but who have shown their presence in village events before, who would be very disruptive. Right. And they would be certainly represent diversity, but they would not represent cooperation. So I think that I'm saying it's probably is important for us to look over whoever's on the volunteer list.
I do think that we've kind of tried going down that road of being almost 2PC, where you have the person that's like a climate denier on the Green Policy Task Force.
That didn't work out too well, did it?
It didn't work out that well. You know, because then it was like, it literally was like, theater every time they met. So I think that our appointments, I'm happy to have a diverse set of, voices on it, but they have to be cooperative voices.
So I think that's the key point, and that makes me a lot more comfortable with not worrying about the whole thing kind of just blowing up and more of an.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Because what Mark had said, I was thinking about it in my head in a slightly different way. And I was thinking that, well, we have a mission, right? So like the way I look at it is that if you don't buy into the mission, you can't be on the committee.
Yeah.
But what I do think we should have is, if you have a mission, there's never only one way to get to that mission, right? And there might be a diversity of voices in what is the best way. I'm interested in really focusing on this. No, I'm really interested in focusing on that. I think this is the best way to get it. No, I think this is the best way.
Yeah.
I think that's productive, right? To have different thoughts of people. If everyone's agreeing on everything, we're not going to get the best ideas. But if there's different, but I think that discussion has to come in underneath the umbrella of I believe in this, so that the people that Mark is referring to, and that, what Brian mentioned with the, climate denier on the Green Policy Task Force, I'm not ashamed to say that I think that the people in the committee have to buy into this idea. If you agree with the idea that Irvington should be a welcoming and inclusive village, then you're welcome on this committee, and we want to hear what you have to say. Mm-hmm. If you want to be on the committee because you're against Irvington being an inclusive and welcoming village, then no, there's not a place for you on this committee.
I agree with that. The other thing that I would say is I also think that there's like, in these spaces, right, and there has to be a level of respect, right, and community norms, right? Like in a lot of the people who disagree with the DEI work of the school district, for example, the problem is not that they're expressing a view, even in that forum, against what, the work that's being done by the district. It's the form in which, they go about it. Like, I think that's the problem. And that I don't think we should have to put up with, right? We shouldn't have to put up with people who are disrespectful, not courteous, like just really disruptive. Aggressive. That's aggressive. That's a perfect word, aggressive. Like, I don't think we don't owe that to people, right? Space to do all those things. I think you can disagree respectfully, and
if they want us to do that, they can come to our board, they can come to us.
Right.
That's
3 minutes, and then we cut them off.
Exactly right. So, to me, again, it's almost like when we talk about even our PAC, which is, obviously is a different mission. There's been some sticky wickets that we said, you don't have to have that debate with every person that, let you give us your recommendation on this particular item. I mean, they do have open meetings, so it's a little hard to say, you can't talk about this, but there's definitely been times when we're like, the decision will be made not by you, but by us. So, and I think it's a similar thing to do with, again, I can't exactly picture how they're going to be meeting. I don't necessarily know if it has to always be the entire group meeting in public. Maybe there's a use for that on some certain ideas. But again, I think that you know, I think the PTSA Diversity Inclusion Committee, gave us somewhat of a role model or a template. So I think that, you know, we kind of see what works and didn't work, and I think that the meetings themselves were productive. It was, you know, the foolishness came after,
Yeah.
maybe on public media or social media or
Yeah.
something like that, so.
Yeah.
So,
I just think, you know, again, I think we have to have standards, right, for how we treat each other, and I do think as a community, we should hold each other to standards, and if people cannot express themselves in a way that's productive, then they, you know, I don't think anyone, especially volunteers on a committee, should be subjected to, like, abuse by, you know, a community member who wants to do that. Like, I really, that's kind of where I think, you know, I put my foot down.
yeah, and to me, it's like, it's not even there. Like, if someone said, you know, someone said that we should, not have any of our traditional, you know, celebrations, okay, but if you're saying it, you know, politely and respectfully, we'll listen to you. If you're, you know, talking about, you know, burning down Madison Park because we have our Oktoberfest, it's a different, you know what I mean? Like, it's not.
Brian's like, don't mess with my recipe.
Exactly. It's you know, that's holy ground, but, you know, it's one of those things where it's probably a bad example, but it's okay to disagree and have a strong opinion against the norm or against the committee, be the minority opinion, but you can do it in a way that is productive and, you know, civil.
Yeah, and the other thing is that right, like, when you have committees, like, not everybody agrees, and at some point, there's a little bit of majority rule, and then the board decision that comes into play.
Yep.
So I think, you know, that's not gonna be any different here. So, I mean, I think these are all very good points, and so, you know, I think we should proceed with it, and it'll be interesting to me, actually, to see who wants to do it.
Yeah, I think the first step is announcing we were doing it, which we've done. Second one is kind of doing the resolution, and then third is see who raises their hand, because I do think that in some ways will, also set the tone for the types of meetings, at least the initial ones. You know, who knows what it is in a year, but, you know, people meet in a group or.
Obviously, it's gonna have a trustee liaison, but do you think the committee self-defines, or do you think there should be a chair of the committee from the start? I mean, it's gonna be obvious, I think, when you see the list of names.
Right.
I should like to see how that happens organically from the get-go, but.
So other committees I've been on, I mean, it's hard to not have,
Yeah.
you know,
For sure.
to not have a structure to define this. I found that a lot of times there's, time wasted, you know?
Yeah, and I think sometimes it might end up being co-chairs, like, you know, like the actual format, it can be tweaked a little bit, but, you know, I agree that there should be.
Yeah, it's not that unusual to have a committee, appoint a chair on their own.
Yeah.
After a first meeting,
Assuming
for
they can,
example.
yeah.
Right. So we should be able, I mean, I know that, like, for GPTF went through several formats, but the latest one, which was kind of a review, a resuscitation of a previous one, kind of like a core executive committee, and then they have a cloud of other people around that come in for these subtopics or sub-projects.
I envision it would probably work like that, like, based on even the DEI committee for the school, you know, it just, one is a lot of, it's like this green policy task force, it's just a lot of topics that you can
And they're
tackle.
Diverse topics.
Yeah, there's like diverse topics, so
Yeah.
usually
Another joke.
you end up, yeah. So you end up, I think I think they'll figure that out, like, it's gonna depend on the group of people. It's less likely to have a chair, by the way, just because it's like to do, the inclusion part of it, you probably have co-chairs at the minimum, but I do think, yeah. So
I mean, someone's got to take the responsibility
Yeah.
for scheduling the meeting, the room,
Right.
if there are notes.
Right.
And also, the other thing that sort of strikes me as probably important, which I have not seen us do in other committees, but maybe the committee, one recommendation we can give them, or the liaison can give them, is to make a expected rules of conduct kind of thing. Just a statement right off front that, you know, this is for respectful and, whatever.
I can promise you that will happen, because that happens in every, like, I think, you know, in the DEI world, that always, like, that's kind of one of the basic things, which is like, you know, how do we come into the room? Like,
Yeah.
what's our code of what's our rules, what's our contract, right? The NYU work that was done at the school, that was the first thing in every single meeting and training you ever went to. It was like, here are the basic rules, right? We're gonna speak with respect, talk from, there are all these. So I anticipate that, that would be there too. And it's a good, I think it's also a good, model for what, anybody who comes into the committee, right? Like what is expected of you. I think it's a good, yeah, I think it would definitely happen, Mark. I think that's right.
Yeah, I just think that's
So practically, Larry, we do this at the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll put this on the agenda for Monday, and, in the meantime, we should all be thinking about potential members, yeah, and we'll also formulate some sort of, more broad outreach, but I think, certainly reaching out targeted dates for people who might be interested would be helpful.
All right. Good. So I don't think we had any actual tweaks, except as written.
I thought you said actual tweets. I was like, what?
No, we didn't tweak anything on there, so it's good. And now we'll talk about a discussion of a policy for video conferencing at meetings.
Truth is, most of the most of the rules are laid out in the law. But the one thing you have to do, there's two things you have to do. One was, authorize video conferencing for meetings, which you did, I think at the last meeting or the one before. Then the other thing, what you've got to come up with is what the rules are for, defining the extraordinary circumstances. That's the language, statutory language, extraordinary circumstances. And then, what rules you want to lay out. Although like I said, most of the rules are laid out in the state law. You've got to, let people be there, minutes, posting, all this stuff is laid out. It probably wouldn't be a bad idea to put them in your rules just so that they're there. But the issue that you have to resolve is what you want to consider extraordinary circumstances, or what you want to consider as reasons for people to be able to attend the meeting, members to attend the meeting remotely. Of course, that there has to be a quorum present, but I think everybody, does everybody understand all those parts? Okay.
So
Yeah.
I hear extraordinary, and I know people usually jump to like, oh my God, it has to be a fire or something, but doesn't extraordinary just mean not ordinary, right? It
Well,
means like
they gave a few examples.
Yeah.
And that are in the statute: disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities. Now, certainly, caregiving responsibilities aren't.
Right.
They can actually, depending on your circumstance, can be pretty ordinary.
So we had that conversation about like, what if somebody had like, had a second home and they were like spending months at a time there? Could they? That wouldn't be to me. That wouldn't be extraordinary. It would be ordinary, right? But if someone's on vacation, like for example, I know that on August 10th, I will be in Portland, Oregon, and we have a meeting that day. So
to be 3,000 miles away is extraordinary.
that's extra. I was going to say that's extraordinary. I'm not usually in Portland, Oregon. I don't regularly go to Portland, Oregon, right? Like, I'm visiting my cousin. So like, I think that would be considered, to me anyway, like that would be extraordinary. If I was told it wasn't, then I would miss that meeting. But I don't know what we gain by limiting in the ways in which people can attend the meeting.
Because at the end, you could always say, well, there's really nothing on the agenda. You can just ignore it anyway.
Right.
So I don't want us to always feel like we become, tied to this. You can never miss a meeting ever, except if you have a doctor's note or something like that. But at the same time, I do think that your example is pretty extraordinary. But I also feel like it almost is like if it's an ordinary meeting, it almost doesn't matter. It's like almost splitting those fine hairs. But if there was like a vote on the Broadway buffer or something like that, getting rid of the Broadway buffer throughout town or something, that might, it's almost like the meeting dictates some of like the purpose of you being there. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if we can even allow for that. But in my mind, if it's like if you were in Portland tonight, you wouldn't necessarily have to have dialed in, because So, kind of like, we weren't voting on anything, like it was,
But we can do that, or I did
if you wanted to, you could.
You know what, let me just read let me read the whole sentence, okay? Okay, members of the public body shall be physically present at any such meeting, unless such member is unable to be physically present at any such meeting location due to extraordinary circumstances as set forth in the resolution and written procedures, which you're gonna write, including disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities, or any other significant or unexpected factor or event which precludes the member's physical attendance at such meeting. To me, that's kind of difficult language, because it does suggest unexpected, but is that, it says including those, including disability. Yeah, I mean, like I said to Larry, we have to see how this kind of plays out and how people are dealing with it, because, I don't know, I mean, my gut sense is that right now, it's not unexpected.
But it's significant, remember, it's significant or unexpected.
Any
There's a choice,
other
right?
significant or unexpected.
So it's not unexpected, but it's significant.
Any other,
I
I don't know, I don't find that sentence easy to understand.
No, it's not a well-written.
But it gives you leeway.
Yeah.
Right, I was gonna say, it doesn't say limited to, it
Yeah,
just says
It just
including.
says including,
I
yeah.
think we should write what we wanna write, and if somebody thinks it's.
Yeah, that's right, that's what I mean,
So, if we ever get in trouble for having someone attend a meeting,
Yeah,
I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
I think the
Horrible. Someone wants to
vacation,
come to a meeting.
I mean, I think the vacation thing, especially like, I think what you're suggesting is, maybe it's not always good to still be at a meeting if you're on vacation, right? Because you're supposed to be on vacation. Or, I'll be in Kenya, so I probably wouldn't be able to dial in, but when I'm on vacation in September. But I do think if you're like in the, normal place that it's probably better for you to be able to dial in than not. If again, if it's something that is significant or you want to, just because I would think that it's almost better to be able to do that, to have an option, rather than to say, too bad, you're in Portland,
From my standpoint, I look at this as a tool for you to be productive. I understand we do have to be careful about language, because there will be a circumstance in the future when only 3 of you are here in the room and 2 are on vacation and don't quite meet the definition, and the vote goes, 3-2, 2-3, or whatever, yeah. The point is that, and then there'll be a challenge, and then, and that's what you're worried about, as you should be. But in 99% of the circumstances, that's not the case. I went back to an example, we were talking yesterday about a conversation, I think it might have had to do with the initial conversations about swing sets and sheds, and maybe there was something where you were not able to attend, or you wanted to attend, and we caught you up later. That's a perfect, I don't remember exactly, but that's a perfect example of, it was just a discussion. Why couldn't you just attend and listen so that you're more productive? We don't all have to get it all secondhand after the fact. That's a simple example, but I think in 99% of the circumstances, it'll be very helpful to keep the momentum on topics and, keep the continuity on topics, if you can, you can do it.
And I think the scenario you're talking about, like a real controversial topic where 2 people or even 3 people, the quorum was dialed in, and it went 3-2, and so someone on the phone or someone dialed in had to be obviously part of the vote. The amount of times where we have something so time sensitive that we had to vote that night, and we had people, unexpectedly out of town, like the Venn diagram of that gets really small, so it's, how many things have we voted on that are really timely in nature? I could probably count them on 0 hands, and how long I've been on, what I mean, like. Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could come up with some, I'm sure, but the timeliness isn't usually that important, so to me, it's better to have like the one person typically involved. And if we got to that point where like, this is gonna be very controversial, possibly litigious, we could say, you know what, we're holding the vote over until the next meeting, or whatever. And again, I'm sure there's a case where we couldn't do that, but, you know, I don't think we necessarily have to legislate it so, you know, finally that we're playing for that 1% that we can't even think about.
Yeah, and give up the productivity in exchange for, and if there were a situation where it looks like there was, that we weren't in agreement on something and there was gonna be a 3-2 vote and I'm in Portland or whatever, just don't do it. Like, you know, it's like,
Yeah.
move the vote or
Yeah.
I wouldn't vote, you know what I mean, to make sure that we don't have.
And I do think that the only thing we want to try to avoid is that, you know, I decide that I'm avoiding New York State taxes, so I'm in Florida 181 days a year,
That's different.
and I'm dialing in, you know, like that's
That's not
different.
extraordinary.
Or every weekend I go up to my house in, you know, Albany, so I'm still in the
That's
state.
not
But,
extraordinary.
right, so to me, like that's the one that, look, it's a pattern then, and it's like, okay, he's never here. So there's a big difference between that and you dialed in from Kenya to vote on some crucial issue from a payphone.
You should see the Wi-Fi tent, be in the Wi-Fi tent.
I don't know if that helps at all, if it makes it
Give
harder.
you enough direction, or?
I think, I mean, so do you wanna specify such as being, you know, out of town on vacation?
I think
Or
that
you
makes
wanted-
it very clear, so that way, if no one so if you kind of play it out again, if we put that in our policy, and it's obviously, it's not a law, but it's our policy that'll be posted, and no one ever says, hey, you know, you can't let someone on vacation vote, you know, yes, will cover us 100%, no, but now we're covered again to a certain, you know, like, it's like all these things lining up, or the chances of us getting some kind of important legislation blocked by a lawsuit.
And Mayor, I don't know if you can, you know, you're so good at this that you probably can, is, like, I think the point that Brian was making earlier, is like, if, you know, if someone is away and it's not a regular occurrence, like somebody going to Florida for half a year or going to that weekend home, which is like, you know, something I've done really, you know, like, then that would not qualify as being extraordinary because it's regular. Like, extraordinary means not the ordinary, you know? And if there's a way to kind of make that distinction, that would probably be good. I know, I feel terrible even asking that, but.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I do think it's important to kind of say that vacation, you know, that because that's really what it's, like, I think probably intended for, right? I think.
And if you play even out of vacation, like going to your, you know, daughter's wedding, it's still vacation. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have to be a huge event like that's, you know, or, you know, your son's hockey tournament or whatever it is. Like, you know, I think it covers it. You know, it's not always like me just going down to the Bahamas to drink beer in the sun. You know, like it's, sometimes you kind of have to be on vacation. You know, it's not.
Well, you could, I mean, you could say, or, because I wouldn't say vacation covers going to a wedding, so, I don't know whether you want to talk
Personal
about,
events, one of the words,
right, but
uses the word events.
yeah, I just see, but the thing is, I don't like that unexpected,
You
yeah,
can't go to the same wedding every week, you know?
such as, you know.
Unless you live in Las Vegas.
You go to several in one night.
Let me try to
On your own.
find some like generic term for things
Yeah.
like weddings and funerals.
Because the reality is there's probably two of the most popular circumstances when this would be used. One's vacation and the other's illness.
Right.
Beyond that, and I think there'll be an occasional, you know, someone lives at the top of Riverview Road and can't make it here, you know, because of the snowstorm. But that's extraordinary, that's okay. You know what I mean? If as long as three of you can get into this room, then you're okay. But the point is that the first two are the things that you're gonna use this for. And as long as we can come up with wording to cover that, then that's completely useful.
I think there's a third one, but maybe it's under one of your two, but it's like, well, that's a personal health thing, like, avoidance of crowds.
Right, because of COVID, like
Well,
the numbers are.
Yeah, I put that under illness, but not, you know.
But not, I mean, I
Yeah.
consider it's probably, but I didn't know.
Illness adjacent.
I would
No,
say
not-
disability or.
Yeah, I'm not saying that.
Somebody's illness.
I wasn't suggesting language for that. I was just saying that there's two categories.
Well,
There's
it
two
is,
categories of things where you're gonna use use this, and those are the two broad categories. And I would put, you know, avoidance of crowds as a
So it's not a
Yeah,
psychological.
but generally,
Right, agoraphobic.
It's also, it's
what were the
caregiving.
two things you said besides vacation?
Illness.
vacations and illness.
Oh, well, no, illness is no, okay.
Yeah,
Well, no, I'm
It's
assuming you guys wanna leave those,
Oh, yeah.
disability and caregiving
Yeah.
responsibilities.
I'm sorry.
And again,
I
agree
mean,
with
as
you.
long as the statute gives them.
And I agree with you too, like caregiving to me is like, if I'm taking care of my grandma every day, that's also, then I have to have known that when I was signing up for the board, you know, like, to me, it's like, the sick kid is different than, oh my gosh, I was leaving, my son had 104 fever, I'm staying home.
I don't know, you wanna
But
leave that?
I think just leave it in generically, but.
I think
Because-
this is not the state language, because then we can
Yeah.
never be dinged for it.
These
Like,
those- these those-
Yeah, but- Well, no, be careful though, because let's say you've got somebody who runs for the board, and got a, you know, set of twins at home, I want to be on the board anyway.
That's crazy.
Or just his one kid, and no, she or he can't come to the meetings, and says, well, no, listen, there's an exception, I don't have to be there for caregivers, so, I mean,
That is tough, yeah, I mean, if you're just saying that I wanna put my kid to bed every night, it's different than.
Is it possible to have like this sounds terrible, but
Who's
like,
the judge of that?
like a maximum number of times you can invoke this privilege?
you can do whatever you want, these rules are yours, I'm just telling you to think about that, maybe you don't care, what?
Yeah.
That still goes back to the word extraordinary, though.
Yeah.
You know, being home every meeting because you have to take care of twins.
I don't think anyone would want, I don't, well, I think we have to kind of the way when we talked about the swings and the sheds, like, I don't think you wanna legislate for like the small little possibilities, but, I mean, I think most, you know, people who have children are not gonna, I'm not that concerned about that, like, I would say that, again, maybe this is like personal with me, but I have an aging mother, right? So I could see a situation, for example, where I like, there's some emergency and I have to like be with my mother and take care of her. So I can't see like most people, I don't know, I'm not so worried, like, I think.
No,
But,
If your mother was in the hospital, would you really even want
Right.
to come to a board meeting?
no,
Yeah,
You know what
but
I'm
you
saying?
know what though, what we could do is rather than the way this is worded, say due to, you can't be there due to extraordinary circumstances, period. Extraordinary circumstances include such things as. And that way, you've got your requirement of extraordinary circumstances, and then those are just samples of it. I think it could work.
but you would say extraordinary circumstances including vacation?
Extraordinary circumstances, okay. Extraordinary circumstances may include disability, illness, caregiving responsibilities, being away on vacation, being out of town on vacation.
I will come up with some wording to modify it, like isolated, as opposed to 181 days in Florida. That's not isolated. But to the point of someone potentially picking through this, to your point about the edge condition, right? I mean, if you have a circumstance where that happens, you've got 4 people on this board who are going to be annoyed by that, and 1 person not, you both a new set of policies.
Here, let me give you another example. I have a,
Right, that's cool.
Well, no, but I mean, that's
But what would happen
that's
then?
democracy.
You go
You
to
know.
policy that they can't.
let's say rather than your attorney, I'm a board member. And I'm sick of coming back to these meetings. I have a house in Wellfleet, I'm generally in Wellfleet from May through September, the beginning of October. And I'm just gonna do it from there. I'm on vacation, it's my summer, I mean, I don't think you want that, I don't think you want that. I said, it's my vacation, I take my summers off, sorry, guys.
But that's not your vacation. I mean, I would argue that that's not really vacation. Like, and by the way, not that it is, we are in different times because of COVID. Like, say COVID made remote working very possible. Right now, I have that issue in my office, like who's going to be in, who's not going to be in, how many days a week. But I do think, you know, these are meetings that you have to be at. And like, I don't think there's like a good faith element missing there, because we, you know, that's not, we know what the obligation is, so to say, well, okay, I'm gonna be gone for 4 months of the summer, well, then you probably shouldn't be doing this job.
I do think the word extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
But again, I think if someone's, it's like, oh, by the way, I'm not gonna be here July and August because I'm gonna be in Wellfleet. That's not for our policy, you know, like, you probably can't vote, or, you know, I guess you could tell the person.
That's not extraordinary.
And I guess if they showed up on Zoom the first time, you could
what
be
we
like,
should do is
yeah.
probably to try and find some way to limit the word vacation.
Yeah, that's what I think. What's
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
said isolate. Well, we've come up with
Yeah.
that.
Or
Yeah.
non-regular.
Yeah,
I think there's a way to tweak that a little bit.
yeah, I
Can
think
you
that's.
say, like, maybe, like, limit, so in our policy, there are, like, for any vacation, like, people are allowed to take vacations for 2 weeks without, like, special permission, so maybe it's like vacations that don't exceed a certain number of weeks, like 2 weeks or like 3 weeks, you know?
But if people go every weekend, be covered then, right? 'Cause it's less than.
No.
Should miss every Monday.
Because sometimes you go, maybe you only go, you know, you only take a vacation every few years, you go to Europe for a month. I mean, so I don't think
And I don't think I can ding that for, if they did that, you know, if you missed every July, there's only 2 meetings, if you missed both July meetings every year, I probably wouldn't think you're a bad person.
You could even have a board as vague as, you know, an occasional vacation day, an occasional, you know?
Yeah, I think that's probably fine.
Right, there's some.
It's pretty loose,
Because then it's
but,
also like, you know, I think, then, as you say, the other 4 members of the board can be like, hey, by the way, you haven't been here June or July or August the last 2 years, so it's not occasional.
yeah.
Okay. What happens if someone breaks the policy?
We just won't be allowed to
Because you can't vote.
attend and vote. You can always watch like anybody else can, but you can't.
Is that what, I mean, I'm just, is that what we're saying? Is that what the law says?
Well, it sounds to me like in order to participate as a remote
It's a
voting member, you need to follow this, and if you don't follow this, then you're just like any other members in the public is listening, Larry won't give you ballot status.
Do we have to clarify that, or is that clear in the law?
No, because if, no, I think
Another
that's
issue I
clear.
just thought of.
You have to be physically present unless you fit into one of these things.
To hear the policy.
And if you don't fit into one of those things, you're essentially not physically
You're not
present.
here.
Even if you walk in,
Video conferencing doesn't count.
yes, that you're normal spot.
Pretty much.
No, that doesn't work, does
No,
it?
because you're in person then. But now we're way down the
Does the policy have to cover, what happens,
Metaverse.
what happens,
Multiverse.
well, I guess this is, it just a meeting wouldn't run, but like what would happen if all 5 of us said, well, we're gonna be on Zoom today because of an extraordinary circumstance?
No, you can't.
do that.
No, I know.
You can only have the video conferencing if there's a
I
quorum.
understand that, that's not I understand that, I do. My question is like, does there need to be some kind of policy amongst the board to regulate, like, who has the right to say I'm gonna be remote, because we have to guarantee that there's 3 people here, that's my point. But I guess if we don't have a policy, it just means that if everyone tried to do it, there would be no meeting, because there would be no quorum.
Which is the way it's always been.
Yeah.
That's really no different than a person.
Yeah, that doesn't change
yeah.
from the video conferencing stuff.
Yeah,
That would
there's
always
no
be the
quorum in that.
case.
Yeah, okay, I just wanted to make sure there didn't need to be some kind of regulation, like,
I don't think so.
right, rotation or vote or something.
So
And it's not first come, first served, because the third person who wants to be out of here, it's extraordinary, so that means you can't just show up
Right.
because you weren't one of the first 2.
Right.
So then it wasn't, yeah.
Okay, so what you're supposed to make your written procedures governing member and public attendance consistent with this section. When you're supposed to, but I think, it seems to me any of the other rules are already in the law, and that's not anything you have to agree with. To me, the one thing that was kind of open was, what would be your excuse for, what excuse would you expect for them not being someone? That's it.
All right, so you'll draft something on it.
You attended remotely by phone when you were commuting back up from the city?
Not yet.
I saw, maybe, I thought I remember someone.
You zoomed in from the UAE, or not UAE, from Dubai.
From Dubai for a meeting.
Yeah, but that was, we were all on Zoom.
That was covered under, yeah. That was
We're all
covered.
Zooming.
Yeah, we were all on Zoom that time.
And anyone was free to visit.
Okay, so you were invited.
We're okay till June 8th. She
That would be
may
great
end
to
up
post that.
extending it, you know, she's got it.
Yeah, I know.
You pay for their.
Okay, so, you wanna try to draft something for Monday, or should we push it up to the following meeting?
I don't think there's a hurry, but aren't we still under some kind of authorization with the state?
Because I
Yeah,
think,
June 8th for.
I think you probably wanna, have a more of a, comprehensive, procedures, about the minutes and everything. Just get it all on one sheet, even though that's dictated by the state. I think it'd be better to have it all, you gotta post it and then where people know about the minutes and stuff like that.
Okay.
There's no, I don't think there's any rush to do it, right?
No, I'm just asking for schedule.
When's our June meeting?
June 6th?
Yeah, so anyway, we could have, we're okay, we do remote work anyway.
Right, 6.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But where are other meetings that month, in June, do you know? Because Juneteenth is the 20th. Did it push back to the?
I can look at the calendar, I have it right here. You said June? We have meetings.
6, 20, and 15.
Oh,
Right, so 20, we're gonna move.
Where are we?
Yeah.
20th, that's Juneteenth, yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Holiday.
holiday that we're recognizing, yeah.
Yeah, so, I actually can't do the 23rd, which is a typical move date.
To the Thursday, evening,
Yeah.
and,
I can't see that. Oh, I didn't know you were moving it,
Yeah,
I scheduled around it.
I should have prompted, yeah, I should
I
have.
just happen to see it now that it says Irvington meeting and Juneteenth in the same day.
Yeah,
Is there a requirement that we meet a certain number of times a month?
our regular schedule is, the first and third Mondays.
Yeah, no, I know
There's no
that.
requirement, no,
Does
no.
it
there's no
Tuesday
requirement.
work? Can it be the next
Because in
day?
the summer, we don't.
That's right.
Twice.
That's right, I noticed that. Right.
Tuesday the 21st?
Yeah, I can do it. I don't know if there's another board.
No, I don't think there is. I think well,
Well, we can get back on that.
What other
Yeah.
board would?
I'll circulate.
I mean, the other thing is, if
circulate
we
it.
don't have that many items pending, we can always cancel it.
Right.
Zoning.
I guess we
Zoning
go,
board would be the,
go-
would be Tuesday, but I don't know.
exactly. Somewhere we only do 2
That is
meetings.
where I thought
Okay,
it was
all right.
Thursday.
I just wanted to make sure, if there was something that we chose that schedule on our own volition, or if there was some kind of open meeting
June
clause.
20th would
required.
be moved to the 21st potentially, but we have to see if there's a zoning board meeting that night. So
There is,
I'll,
well, it's on the schedule,
yeah, so
and the tree commission, but I can miss it,
then
although they'll be sad.
22nd. 22nd? Wednesday, the 22nd?
Okay, well, I can't be there. I'm leaving town for this wedding.
Oh, that's nice. That's extraordinary.
I don't need an excuse. You guys need an excuse.
He writes the rules, she doesn't need an excuse.
So tentatively June 22nd. And then, obviously, items for you, we'll schedule it.
Yeah,
No big deal.
I won't even give you.
No, it's not a big deal.
I know in 2022, this is something you need to say. I'm coughing because I have allergies. I've always been allergic to the month of May. So I want to make sure.
No, they're bad, they're bad.
Yeah, my eyes are bothering me. My eyes are okay right now.
And I forgot to take anything this morning.
Yeah.
I can't wear my contacts, like with allergies or
Yeah.
too crazy.
Look at this, we got scheduling done, this is a big meeting.
So draft, all right, so I need this, you have your.
Yeah, give me one so I can mark it up.
And now we're,
Swing sets?
on to number 4. Review of revised local law making those to respected children's outdoor recreational apparatus shed.
I mentioned
I
that
have an electronic
before,
version, yeah,
before the meeting started, that
I appreciate it.
worked well to scan over Earl's email to us, letter to us. Maybe have a few things that I thought stuck out. You should think about that. Maybe the rest of it, I think we've already done about.
Right.
That was on
I'll just tell you the changes from the last time, it's like very little. You go to page 2, the first set of italics, which says the term building, however, shall not include children's outdoor recreational apparatus or shed, provided the shed does not have a paved foundation, is not greater than 64 feet in area or 10 feet in height, and does not have any side lawn than 7 feet.
So that precludes the 2 by 32 shed.
Yes.
Yeah, I was planning that.
And then the next section, it's in section 5. So the second line of the italics, not greater than 64 square feet in area or 10 feet in height and have no side longer than 10 feet. Same change if you go to page 4, section 8. 12 was changed to 10, and has no side longer than 10 feet was added, and the same thing in section 10, the bottom. I think I picked them all up.
Was that the only change that we discussed?
Yes.
Was that,
You might be thinking 2 changes. There were 2 changes because we had all agreed on the 10 feet.
right,
And then later the thing came up.
oh, right, to discuss, right.
Right. So fortunately, the changes were in the same section.
I don't have a copy of his.
I can bring it up on the screen.
I would just read it.
I have it right here.
I have it, yeah, because we got emailed it.
It says, how will the code be enforced if no building permit is required? Well,
We
like a
discussed
blanket,
that.
right, yeah.
Also, that if you went to do something else, you know,
And then his next question, if sheds can be placed anywhere on the lot, what will prevent me from placing my shed on a neighbor's property line and in direct obstruction of open view?
we discussed that.
I don't think we discussed that explicitly with that in blocking open views. That's the phrase we didn't discuss.
The
What will
intent of
prevent you,
But you're
nothing,
saying-
just common decency, I guess.
Right, but you're saying that the shed of this size is not
It's not that big.
being regulated, so that's the answer.
No, but that wasn't the question.
I think we've answered it by saying, we think it's small enough that it's not blocking views, to any great extent. Just by saying, you know, if it's smaller than this, we don't care where it is. On someone else's property, obviously, still an issue, but.
Well, no, it's not on someone's property, but I think he said on the
On the
property.
property.
Right up to the, you know.
Yeah.
We said we're not going, you know, that there might be a case that comes up here and there, but we didn't want to legislate for the 1%, we wanted to legislate for the 99%.
Well, that's what I think it is. This is a border condition, in a sense.
Pardon?
It's a border condition. It's not that many places where that could happen. I mean, a view of what? You're in a block view, but are you talking about a view of the river, or are you talking about a view of
A tree.
my backyard? You know, you don't get.
Well, he even said, what if I don't want to look at a Home Depot shed in your backyard? And it's like, you don't get to decide what's in somebody else's.
You could buy me a nicer one.
It was.
Because I was thinking about this, when I read the letter, and I was very open-minded, but the one thing I kept coming back to was, so we have some people who have concerns about, what if I have to look in my neighbor's yard and see a Home Depot shed, right? That's being expressed. But I'm thinking about how many people who bought homes in the last, 5 to 10 years, and they don't have a shed because of the rules we've been. I think the overwhelming amount of people who want to have this change so that they can have something like that. It's a much bigger group of people than the people who are concerned about these kind of side issues of like, oh, I'll have to look at a shed. You know what I mean?
For the moment, it's kind of interesting because I remember when I first started working here, sheds were coming up a lot, undocumented sheds. Because apparently, maybe you know, Larry, maybe you remember why it was, but there was a lot of concern by the land use board at the time, and I forget which one it was. It was very concerned about the, like, sheds.
That happened, yeah. That was when I was doing my renovation, and there seemed to be a lot of.
How long ago was that? That was
5
that
years.
long ago. No, this was
Longer?
longer
When I first
ago.
got my mortgage, it was like 20-something years ago, I couldn't get it at first because of a shed on the property line. And I had to dig through, and the previous building inspector had written a variance or, an approval letter for that shed. But until I had a copy of that letter, the title company was going,
Well, I had a member of the planning board very angry on my property looking for the shed that was gonna be, that we were proposing, which we were not proposing. It was in a different application and they mixed up the paperwork. But, I do remember that particular shed was in a corner, and I guess they needed a variance for it, but where it should have been was like the middle of the property, so everyone in the neighborhood really didn't want him to put a shed in the middle of his property. I mean, I would hope that people are also want to be good neighbors, you know, like.
And also like the best look for their own property.
Yeah, if you're not gonna put something that's like, I don't know.
Let's go through the rest of the,
Yeah, okay, his next one, and then Mitch touched on, if I can buy a Home Depot shed, plastic or otherwise, why should I think that my neighbor would approve of this appearance?
They don't have.
They don't have, okay.
The Rockefellers bought their own.
No, it's
views.
interesting because, you know,
The weather might.
we all know we value Earl's opinion and he's always been thoughtful. I think he's writing about the kinds of things that come up to him as an architect.
Yes.
And and the fringe issues that he has had to deal with. So I understand why he's writing this, but I think, as we're going through point by point, yeah, we're acknowledging that he's saying something, but that.
We decided,
Right,
despite that, you want a lot of layers.
Right. Well, at least up till now. I did read through this, but I don't mind going through it one by one.
Yeah, if no permit is required, would there be no ARB review? No. Not even in the historic district. How would a plastic shed be compatible to the historical character of the neighborhood? It is true, they wouldn't be regulated in the historic district either.
but I mean, that said, the properties in the historic district are small.
Right.
And you've got very limited places to put them, and people generally, if they put them anywhere, they're gonna have to put them in a very small backyard. They're not putting them in a front yard.
You can't, yeah.
And so the question is, if it's in the backyard,
No one's gonna see it.
so, I mean, I understand that you don't want, but are people gonna be just, putting up buying the crappiest shed possible and put it on their property when they're, maybe so, but I think people are gonna be a little bit concerned about their own aesthetics. That's just my take.
I think people are gonna care about what their house looks like, right? If
That's
you're
what I
gonna
mean.
get, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's a good point. And but the only issue is, right, your aesthetics may not agree with someone else's aesthetics, and that's why we live in our own homes.
Right. And not,
I get the feeling you've said this before.
I've said this before, my own house.
Okay, so the last one, if shed area is restricted to 64 square feet, it can be 8 by 8, approximately 6 by 11, 4 by 16, 2 by 22, or any aspect ratio that equals 64 square feet.
Used to
The
be.
board has discussed a restriction of no more than 10 feet in length. But while this might be okay for larger lots than the 1F80, 1F40, 1F20, et cetera zone, how will it impact those smaller lots like the 2,500 square foot lots in the downtown historic district area?
Well, obviously,
I don't quite understand.
Well, it's restricted to 64 as the largest it could be. They
Yeah.
can still get something smaller if they live in a
Yeah,
smaller.
I couldn't accept it unless he meant, well, listen, if you've got a small lot, you should be able to have a 2 by 32 shed. I don't know. The only way that makes sense.
It sounds like what he's basically saying is like a 64 square foot shed in a smaller lot is gonna look terrible.
what's gonna use up,
Right, so, yeah,
big chunk of the backyard.
it may look
And
terrible.
once you put 2 sheds in plus a swing set,
That's it.
then you won't have a backyard.
And nobody will see it from the street.
All
I
right.
think we answered that, right? We said we understand that, yes, we're allowing it in the historic district.
Well, there might,
And those parameters.
there may be, maybe we're gonna have to come back to this, maybe there'll be some extraordinary conditions where this heinous, sheds are installed in the neighborhoods that aren't. Then what, then we address it, right?
We may have a shed uproar to deal with.
Just recognize though that
Well,
if
historic
you do,
pitchforks
you can't make those people take them down because they come up with
No, we can burn them down.
Melt them if they're plastic.
That's right.
Oh,
Get the
All right,
plastic
then
around
that's
that.
it. I support making it easier for homeowners to have sheds. in place that, but I can appreciate that it's not more carefully thought out, that it could create some border conflicts between property owners or simply not get passed. Perhaps it might be possible to create a simple application process to the building department, and once reviewed, have ARB reviewed by Kathy.
That's not what we have now. We have to go through all of that.
No, they have to go through
The planning board.
The planning board?
But this would just basically, I mean, the question is, what would you put in, forget about the ARP for a minute, what would you put in a
Building department.
building department application?
It's not ugly. No,
It's
seriously.
not block, it's not blocking.
Where are you gonna put it? So they have to have a little drawing on your property. And then who makes the judgment? Then Ed makes another judgment, or either the office does, and then the building department.
It's
It's not making a judgment on it.
It becomes the.
No, I'm saying that's not,
Yeah,
the
no,
building
I
department's not
think,
making a judgment on whether a shed is attractive or not.
They're enforcing the rules that are in
I'm
place.
just saying, you don't want that. I don't want that.
That's what I was trying to
I
say.
think
Yeah.
that Mark is trying to make that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, so,
What are you gonna look at?
I mean, it's, the whole point of this is not to have people have to have an application and not have to go through review. I mean,
But did we say they didn't need a building permit? Because there's
Yeah.
no building, right?
Yeah.
Is that the
That's
thing?
because
They
no
they
port
just- they
foundation.
don't need a
There's
building.
it doesn't meet the definition of building.
Right,
You specifically excluded it, right?
because it's all
excluded.
prefab.
It says the building does
Right.
not include.
So they could build their own shed from scrap wood.
Yeah.
And not need a permit.
You can do,
If it didn't have a port
you can do
foundation.
anything if it's under 10 feet and 64. You can,
And not on a foundation.
you can have it be out of corrugated metal, whatever you want.
Boy, that's gonna be ugly in the historic.
Again, I think you're talking about the 1% conditions here, you know what I mean, like, you know.
I'm gonna say that the person who builds that is probably gonna have an ugly house.
It's probably, yeah, which is
It'll
the
match
big
perfectly.
And the neighbor's
Yeah,
gonna
but
be
what happens-
already-
It'll be consistent.
So it'll be
right?
consistent. I don't think it'll be a new problem. I think it'll be a continuation of probably an existing.
I would think that most of the cases, if you're ever going to put a shed up that was blocking neighbor views, that you would talk to the neighbor first. I mean, I just can't believe that as,
Yeah, I think 99 times out of 100, the other 1% of the time they hate them and they know it.
Yeah.
But Larry makes.
But you can debate, yeah, you can debate, you know, all right, the property line condition is the one that Earl brought up in his letter. Okay, so instead of property line, you're gonna set it back 5 feet. Well, if it's blocking it at the property line,
Yeah.
and they see it at the property line, they're gonna see it 5 feet back too. So,
It doesn't deal with the issue that.
Right.
yeah, it's,
And I understand the concern, but I just don't think it's
Yeah.
right to get
you just made, you made a threshold decision that something of this size or smaller is not something you're interested in regulating, and that's a sound decision.
And I kind of got, you know, the hyperbole of, you know, the 2x32 that you basically made a fence. Okay,
Okay, so
fine,
you
so
fixed that.
we eliminated it.
That's easy to, you know.
Yeah, and that's fine, you're not,
And again, I think who, you know, just, and this is not in any disrespect to anyone who wrote a letter. People should write letters and they should express. But the fact we get a, you know, a couple letters of people who are concerned about maybe having to look at a shed in their neighbor's yard, I don't think that represents the overwhelming number of people who are dying of an opportunity to have a shed and can't because,
or upgrade what they have.
or upgrade what they have because of the current rules, you know, and so to me, it's like, I understand, you know, what the letter writers are saying. I just think that for the majority of the people in Irvington, they want the opposite.
And I also think you really have a big say over your neighbor's.
Right.
It's like, so the lawn chair, like, where should we stop the lawn? I don't want to look at 2 blue chairs, you know, it's like, okay.
But three's okay?
It balances itself.
Thanks, Troy.
I have to say this discussion is riveting.
It's why your answer is, yeah.
It's 100% why.
Well, coming up with a reasonable approach is what's good.
No, I think that's,
Just,
I think that's right.
to decomplexify, I think that's a-
I think too, it's also feels a little scary to go like, because we don't often take off regulation, you know, it's kind of like a, you know, and I think that to me it didn't make sense to have that middle ground of like, you have to go to the planning board, but you do a hand-done drawing or, you know, like it's,
Yeah.
we didn't want to make it somewhat easier. I think we're willing to say, we're going to risk the Wild West to see what happens. And, you know, we'll be watching closely for the first 2 disastrous sheds that go up so we can put a quick stop to this. We'll have an extraordinary meeting from.
That fast rule.
Yeah. Because everyone's always paying attention to our meetings so much, that there's a lot of sheds that are being ordered right now.
Yeah, right.
In the box in the basement.
So it's like, what is going on?
Yeah, exactly, they're on
Plastic.
Don't forget the
Exact
children's
plastic
play
is-
apparatuses that are going up. There's-
plastic and corrugated metal.
Okay.
Right, but again, just in general, I think our reasoning is sound.
Yeah.
Our reason, it's not something that we do normally, but I think we're really trying to make things better and easier for the majority of our residents.
That's the bottom line, right?
The other thing that just came up tonight is I do think, I agree with the earlier discussion about the sign code, I do think we need to look at a couple of these conditions where, if you're not changing the structure, why
Exactly.
just paint the damn thing?
And on that note,
I didn't see sign code on your priority.
Oh,
I'm just
my
saying.
all in favor of paint the damn
Remember
thing?
how much time you spent on that?
Well, no, but if we have several instances of businesses